that, Spain had changed the law allowing people to renounce Catholicism so they could get married civilly. So Luis went to the U.S. consul in San Francisco. The first time I heard them speak Spanish, and they were kind of yelling at each other. You young people don't know what you're doing. But anyway, so that's how I got here. I had never been to Spain. I'd been to Europe 3 or 4 times. I wasn't rejecting Spain. It was just a bit farther, I think, also. But I was thinking it was sort of brave to come here, to live without having ever seen it.
It's true. What year was that?
In 1969, July. Well, actually, we went straight to Ibiza to build a house with 7 Catalan friends. So we still have that house many years later. 8 bedrooms.
8 bedrooms?
Yeah, each couple had their bedroom, and then there's a common area. And it's still standing up.
And you still own it cooperatively with the other people?
Mm-hmm. It was the Catalan hippie house or something, yeah.
That's good. And Gabriel, when did you come?
I came in 1983. Incidentally, let me tell you to start with, I'm really hard of hearing, so that get the questions to me.
I'll repeat it.
You came in, but had you been here before? Were you here while Franco was?
Oh yes. Well, let's see. I was in Spain for the first time in 1950. Because I was a student at the University of Toulouse, and came here. See, in relation with my thesis, in a sense, I was learning to speak French and Spanish at the same time because I was in the university there, and I was coming here and interviewing people and so on. 50 to 52, I saw a good deal of Spain. Then 60 to 62, then. Right after Franco's death, I was a visiting professor in the Complutense, and then I came here to live in 1983.
And between 52 and 62, what kinds of changes did you see?
Well, in 62, things were beginning to be a little bit easier. 50 to 52, the country was, there was very little white bread, and there were this business of people selling one cigarette was often just a question of poverty. A person could only buy one cigarette, was the custom.
Yeah. And then by 62, they were beginning to look outward a little more. And...
Yes, I would say that people weren't as afraid anymore. You certainly couldn't talk with people about the Civil War in 1950 unless you were a direct friend just arriving from Paris with a letter to the person you're meeting, and so on and so on. And that's how I had some connections. But that's the only way. I wouldn't start talking to a person in the train or on the bus. Whereas by 62, there were jokes, there were hints, people.
Well, when did the tourist boom start? I think that, according to Mishner in Iberia, that's what just opened it up. If the Sueca came down here in her bikini, I mean, it's just... and then they had to be getting ready to get into Europe eventually, although, especially, after the Portuguese and Greek dictatorships fell, Spain was the only one left. But
I don't know.
Have you watched Cuéntame Cómo Pasó? A very interesting TV show that's been on for 7 years about the end of the Franco years and the transition. It's Thursday nights on TV1, but it goes through a lot of just when they won Eurovision with. They were just like they didn't fit these books about Africa, North Africa, Spain and North Africa on $5 a day, or Africa begins at the Pyrenees. We're just getting to them, And when they won Eurovision, it was like recognition of some sort, and I think that's what pushed it. But as far as I was going to say, when I came in '69, I started at the North American Institute, where I was for many years, almost immediately, but. There was we were told no politics in the classroom, and there certainly weren't. We were told, I was going to say, when I first came, I didn't see a police state. that I expected, as I had seen in South America, and even Paris sometimes has more police. But they said there were a lot of plainclothes policemen, and in your class, very possibly. So, though it's interesting, then during the transition, we interviewed everyone from Fraga to Carrillo, the whole spectrum a few years later. But it was definitely no politics. Women had to wear skirts, men had to wear jackets and ties. There was a mimeograph machine, which was considered very exceptional because that was forbidden. As meeting people in groups of more than, do you remember that? Was that 3, 4, 10? Because if you were meeting, you might be conspiring, you know. I've just been talking to a few friends what they remembered, yeah.
Yes, well, that's a difference, come to think of it, for me, between 1950 and 1960. In 1960, I was a member of a tertulia and people in their 30s, and we talked about the Civil War, too. Now, I'm sure there were no... They'd made sure there were no hidden microphones in the room, but there was that difference of personal ease. Because in 1950, there's only people that you really knew from somebody you could completely trust.
So even, I mean, so you were in Barcelona pretty quick after you came. You didn't stay in Ibiza then, is that?
No, that was just the summer to build 1 month, and then straight to the North American Institute.
So you also found, I mean, this sort of, did you know an atmosphere of fear even in the late 60s when you were here, for that people were reluctant to talk politics or reluctant to talk about these things?
Yeah, we only talked with other lefties, basically. Yeah. And I had the feeling too. I remember some of the friends of my parents were in a hotel and they wanted to know about Franco. I said, we better go out on the street. I mean, there was this feeling of just don't say anything. Another big thing was the culture, you know, the official culture. I can't remember what newspaper I read, but anyway, there was Hola and Nodo. Do you remember Nodo, the news at the cinema?
Oh, yes. Well, I tell you, the only newspaper that I read with any confidence was Le Monde.
Oh, okay.
And if Le Monde didn't arrive, you knew something important had happened.
Really?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anytime the foreign press didn't arrive, it had an article about Spain. Yeah.
Wow.
The Spanish, the style of Ya and the other
ABC.
newspapers, I don't remember their names all, the style was very stiff. It just was hard to read for that reason. But you needed French newspapers. There weren't many English newspapers. I guess there, too, there's a big difference. Lots of people knew French in 1950 or 1960. Now it's English, which is the first foreign language.
That's true, yeah. And then the movies, there were movies here, but for Easy Rider or anything, Midnight Cowboy, you had to go to south of France. We were called the Blue Pilgrims. They even had buses taking you up there, hotels or whatever. There was a joke about, did you see The Last Tango in Paris? No, I saw it in Perpignan. Pretty bad movie, actually, in retrospect. But
did you go up to see some movies in Perpignan?
Oh yeah, quite a bit. Yeah. Well, I think we drove. Yeah. And the other going to say, newspapers, books, anything about the Civil War. I'm sure Luis bought your book. There was a place called Ruedo Ibérico. At least when we were in Paris, you would buy the books there, and then there was always the border crossing. I don't know if you went. Because my husband had long hair and a beard, so they took everything out of the car. And then even 20 miles later, the Guardia Civil could stop you and go through the whole act again. But we decided they were mostly looking for Playboy, which I think was true, so they could confiscate.
Take home.
And that was, And what else about cult? I don't know. I felt a little frustrated, but we did go to France a lot. We participated in politics there, and 6 hours for Spain, which later became 6 hours for the Sahara or something, where we met Paco Ibañez. And we went to Sweden the first 2 summers, so there was a lot of things going on there. And I guess everywhere you're busy with life, with your job, raising children, so...
Did you have a car?
I was pretty happy here.
Did you have a car here?
Yeah, I'm not really a
There
driver.
wasn't too much traffic, was there? I assume there was less traffic, less noise.
I was talking to a friend today who didn't want to be named. She went on for an hour and a half, and then she called me back. But she said, in the end, with Franco, at least there wasn't so much traffic, and you could take a train south of Barcelona. Though she suffered, she said, it just makes me queasy even remembering about it. She had been here 10 years earlier than me, when it was, I think, a bit tougher. What else? Did you sign petition? She said her husband had signed petitions, but nothing happened. No.
No.
This was to save people for being executed. And I said, did you ever save anyone? Probably not. They went right up to the last minute.
Yeah.
October, 75. We were in Minnesota then at a demonstration at the university. I think 5 people. Anyway, it was pretty...
1960 was the year when they had the first Fulbrights in Spain, and I had the good luck to have one of those. But I always remember a friend of mine, Kossoff, who's from Brown University in Rhode Island, and he knew that I was here to write a book about the Republic and so on. So he used to introduce me to people saying, I want you to meet my friend Gabe Jackson, who's making his last trip to Spain.
Were you...
This was the book, no?
Yes,
It made you famous,
it was
yeah.
the book, yes.
Were you under any kind of supervision or vigilance, do you think?
Well, not that I know of. On the contrary, I would say that the more sophisticated people in the foreign ministry and in the police wanted an American student to feel that this was a free country. You see, that there was, what do you mean dictatorship? You can see anything you want. And it wasn't absolute, but I worked in the Hemeroteca in Madrid. I saw the entire press, including left and Trotskyite and communist and everything else. The only thing I could not see was the military archives. I went a couple of times to I forget the name of the street. It's where there's a public exhibition area now in Madrid. But there was a colonel at the desk who, asked me questions and what do you want to do and so on. And I remember as I'm talking to him, I'm looking at a picture of Franco with illumination of Christianity around
halo.
his head. Yes, a halo and a white uniform and so on. The Caudillo
The Crusade.
was, and the Crusade. Yes, that was all. But those habits didn't all stop with the end of Franco. I'd rather not say at the moment who was interviewing me, but a high official of the Generalitat in the late 1980s didn't like something that I had written in El País, and I had an interview in which he did all the talking, and there were 2 Sbiros right there
Henchmen.
with him, and so on and so on. This was already in constitutional Spain. That is, there are a lot of habits that don't change just because there's a new government.
People go where the power and the money is, basically.
That's right.
In life, I was saying.
Yeah.
Was this because you were defending bilingualism?
Yes,
Yes.
that was the issue. Yes.
When did, I'd like to know from both of you, when did you, I assume when you first came to Barcelona, the whole Catalanismo was not, people didn't talk Catalan in public like they didn't talk politics in public, is how I kind of understood it.
Oh, during Franco?
I wouldn't say,
Yeah.
no, people certainly
Families
spoke
did.
Catalan. There was, in fact, I'd say that I think that the nationalists have an exaggerated persecution complex on that score. Nobody stopped you from speaking Catalan. You couldn't use it officially, so to speak.
Yeah. Were you aware right away pretty much of the whole Catalan question, or you maybe knew about it before you came here?
No, I knew before I came. Actually, it was one of my reasons for settling in Barcelona. I was interested in the whole question of the nationalism, bilingualism, and what do you do in the schools, and so on and so on.
And how about you, Jane?
Yeah, no, it was the first language I heard. In Ibiza, they were speaking Catalan, basically. And I was always very interested in it. I was very excited that we were going to be able to take courses, and I took several. And it wasn't a big audience, but I went to every movie they made, La Ciutat Cremada, Som y Serem, to every... I always looked for Catalan creation in the theater, not just translations, but anyway. But as it became a little more of an imposition, I sort of feel like if I speak Catalan, then I'm giving in. And then, since this Oficina de Denuncias Lingüísticas is really a bit off-putting. What's the other called? The fines and the sanctions. And the fact that somebody can study in French, German, English, Catalan, but not Spanish. And even Japanese. They say, well... Have you heard the Japanese built a school? Apparently, I'm glad my children are 26 and 28 and can express themselves very well in Spanish too. Yeah, written and read. What else?
Yeah. Where were you when Franco died? On the day that Franco died?
On the day that Franco died, I was in California. At UCSD where I was teaching. Now, a month before Franco died, he almost died.
Right.
And it had been announced on the radio, and I remember a party that night and lots of champagne. And then it was almost a sort of, anticlimax when he actually did die. Though I must say that the only time in my life that I felt sympathetic to Franco was when these doctors were insisting on keeping him alive, and I had the feeling that his family was so afraid of what might happen after his death that no matter how he felt or how little he was really alive, by God, they were going to keep his heart ticking as long as they could.
Do you think they chose November 20th to coincide with Primo de Rivera? Was it Primo de Rivera, no?
Yeah,
it's a double.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that hadn't occurred to me as a possibility.
Where were you, Jim?
In Ecuador, yeah. We were going on a trip through South America, ready to uncork the champagne for about a month, like you, yeah. In Quito, I think. Yeah. But then we came back here in December '75, and I was very interested in the transition. I started reading Cambio 16. I don't know what else we read then. I felt I followed it and understood it quite well. And then in 1995, I bought Victoria Prego's book on the transition. What a thriller, and how little I knew really what went on behind the scenes. With a lot of credit to King Juan Carlos and Adolfo Suarez. My goodness.
Yes.
Just after Franco died, Juan Carlos had an envoy, emissary, friend who went, maybe you know this, went to Bucharest via Paris on an unmarked plane to talk to Ceausescu. How do you pronounce it?
Ceausescu, yes.
To get the word to Santiago Carrillo that he was going for democracy. And if Carrillo would just hold back, be nice, which worked out in the end, And then he had to deal with Arias Navarro for quite a while, who didn't want to go. And then in July '76, he took the risk of appointing Suarez, who had been connected with the movement, and people were skeptical, but he did quite a job. I was just skimming the book again. They said the worst part of the transition was the end of January '77 when they shot the labor lawyers in Atocha.
Oh, yeah.
And there had been 2 kidnappings of Oriol and Village Uskeska, killing some policemen. And it was like the bunker, the right wing, was just ready to put a military government in again. And then that spring, they did get the reform law through and got rid of some of the movement laws, or whatever. And Suarez met secretly, another espionage thing, outside Madrid with Carrillo. Only 3 people knew. And then he sent all his ministers on vacation in Semana Santa. The 9th of April, he took the solitary decision almost to legalize the Communist Party. In June 15th, there were elections, and UCD got the majority, the socialists about half, and the communists, I know it's 9% or 9 votes. So, but that wasn't the end. No, I mean, as we saw yesterday in the papers about Felipe's 25 years, the transition wasn't over till 82. There were 4 attempted golpes. I only experienced Tejero because I was pregnant, and I had to stay in bed for 6 months, but it was only 5 hours of total panic. But also, I was aware of the one on the 27th of October, 82, just the day of reflection before the SOE one. And there are different scenarios on what they were going to do. I always understood it was Cebrián who stopped it by writing Crónica de un golpe anunciado en el país. But they gave some other. But anyway, Carmen Romero says there were 2 other, attempted. But supposedly after 82.
When Tarradellas came back, were you here?
I was, I went to meet him, well, not at the airport, Gran Via marched, Sokaki, yes. That was very exciting. I just would I hope, I'd hate to see Spain falling apart after all they've gone through. You've been, I think, quoted in public saying the 30 best years of Spain's history,
And how about, where were you, Gabriel, on the 23rd of February, 81 there? Where were you when that happened?
I was in California. A friend of mine sent me the photograph on the front page was on the front page of La Vanguardia of Tejero holding, and that was pasted on the outside of the lavatory in my apartment in La Jolla for a number of years. But I wasn't here for the event. I was here when the Communist Party was legalized. Well, and there's another thing, I don't know whether this has to do with Franquismo or there was an agreement made, an important agreement between the University of California and the Complutense to exchange professors for a quarter at a time. And I was over here on that quarter, I guess it was in 1977, I think. But I never had anything to do with the Complutense. Nobody seemed to know what I was here for. I finally had a seminar with a half dozen secondary school teachers who were going to get credit for taking work that would improve, but it had absolutely nothing to do with the university, whereas the one who was in La Jolla in my place was in a regular university teaching situation. I don't know, that was in some ways that was a sort of introduction to a kind of informality or just doing things off the cuff. My salary was paid, so that part of it was all right. But I really had almost nothing to do with the university, although theoretically I was there as a visiting professor.
I was going to ask you, were you surprised by Tejero? Did you realize how shaky I thought we were just going to jump from Franco's death to democracy. That's what Luis had told me.
Oh, well, no. I would, on the contrary, I was pleased that there was only one such incident. It really seems to me it was wonderfully managed, and 2 other people, if I can remember their names well, the vice president of the Socialist Party, who was
Alfonso
Guerra, and Fernando Abril.
He was Abril, a minister.
What's his other apellido there? Anyhow, those 2. See, Fernando Abril was the second. Oh God. this is where
Was this in the
my
organization?
age and the question
No.
of names is.
Was this the
But
organization of the party?
anyway,
Oh.
there's a Fernandez Abril and the second of the Socialist Party were constantly meeting to smooth out things privately that couldn't be done in the. And then Felipe Gonzalez and Adolfo Suarez, who were the top men. It's their immediate assistants who deserve a lot of the credit for our getting the Constitution we've got.
You're not thinking of Fernandez Miranda, Torcuato?
No, it's not Miranda.
He drafted the reform law, yeah.
And where were you when you were pregnant when the attempt
Yes,
occurred?
And since I was supposed to stay in bed, my mother was here, poor dear. I was stuck here for 40 years. No. Fortunately, the king came on at midnight. It was Milan's Bosch, had the tanks out in Valencia and was waiting for support, which
It
he
was
didn't
scary,
get.
wasn't it? It was really seriously scary.
Were you here then?
I was here, yeah.
Yeah. Where were you?
I was in Foreman.
Oh, you said that before.
And,
right?
when they came on the radio in Valencia and said, everybody go back to their homes. These people in the remote place you could imagine, people cried and they all went home. And I couldn't believe it. I really was shocked.
They did what they were told.
They did what they were told, and they really thought it'd come back. And you got this sense of, for me, it gave me a different sense of what it had been like here than I had even being here myself when Franco arrived.
This still carries on a bit, I think. Read recently. Either you do nothing, you just accept things, or you do nothing, or you get really mad. But the idea of being assertive or speaking up for your rights, I always say just ask. Just in any situation. They can say yes or no, but, there's often, no, tú no digas nada. Yeah, I get this from
Did you see in those days, like in the 60s, for instance, when you came in the early 60s, did you see a level of poverty which you don't see on the street today? It may still be here, but you don't see poverty really.
Well, it's coming back now. I'd say it's coming back, but
yeah.
it wasn't nearly as bad in 60 to 62 as it was in 50 to 52. That was poverty that I'd never seen, and I don't imagine any young American had seen that much. The steps of every church, there were half dozen people, and people who thought they could, that you looked a little bit sympathetic, they'd follow you in the street and
beggars.
oh
No?
boy, it was it was really
In downtown Barcelona. Or certainly around Spain.
The visual memory I have right now is of a trip to Seville,
I'm going to say
where.
And the healthcare system, I suppose, was not.
Oh, and lots of people with is it glaucoma?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Eyes. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
He was asking about the healthcare system.
very. They hadn't really gotten started. That's one of the ways in which Spain has come a couple of hundred years
It's pretty
in
good
20
now,
years.
I think, Social Security.
And did you see a lot of poverty when you got here also? Or?
I wasn't overly struck by it. We weren't until we went outside Barcelona. There were certain gypsy areas around Montjuic. I've never been to La Mina yet. Have you guys? I always was going to take my kids out there when they were complaining
We did
about
a story last year.
Where was that?
La Mina. It's a famous area,
Yeah.
But what's interesting is the rest of Spain, which looked so poor 30 or whatever years ago, has really come up. My husband's just shocked because I think the Catalans tend to put down the rest of Spain as poor, but there's a lot of life in Albacete.
Something I very much remember about the appearance of Spain in 1950-52. Especially in Barcelona, it was as if there were just 20-watt bulbs in the street lights. It was really dark. It wasn't quite that dark in Madrid.
That's a good comment. Yeah.
But on the other hand, Barcelona store windows and displays were much more attractive. You certainly got the feeling that people had much more aesthetic sense here than they had in Madrid.
No, when I was getting married and had never been here, I tried to find newspapers in San Francisco. The only thing I came up with was ABC, and the only pictures of women, they were dressed from head to foot in black. So I thought, wow.
How about how did you find when you came to Barcelona to teach that first year this situation of women? Were women treated as secondary citizens, or?
No, I was going to say before, there was a sense of blackness. People didn't wear colors much. All the school kids wore navy blue.
Yeah.
And as far as women, I was lucky. I have a very nice liberal husband, but women couldn't have, I don't know when this changed. They couldn't have bank accounts in their own names. They couldn't be if they were out of the home for more than 15 minutes, the husband in theory could call the police. I mean, she was supposed to be home, wearing a skirt. What else? Catalan women always had more rights, something I respect. And with control of their money, I think. What do you remember?
What I remember actually, especially, I was in Madrid more than in Barcelona that earliest time, 1950 and 51, that women seemed to me more independent than men. Now, maybe there was a certain noblesse oblige on the part even of police and civil guards that I don't know whether that is a reason for it. But what I thought when I studied especially medieval Spain, the fact that Spain had remained a Catholic country because the priests had worked on the women, the wives of the Islamic invaders and so on, but now it's your responsibility to educate the children, so on and so on. And that gave, because I had this feeling, and I still have it, but it was much more noticeable 50 years ago, that Spanish women seemed to be more independent, more sure of themselves than men. Oh, and also I would say that here I was a student in France, which of course was a free country, but still 1950 is just 5 years after World War II, and still memories of the Nazi rule and so on and so on. But that it was much easier to get birth control information in Spain than it was in France.
Really? Oh.
Now, again, it may have been just the contacts of friends told me what drugstore to go
to buy the pills.
To buy the pills, yes. But all those things were available if you moved in the right circles or knew.
And something I always respected is we have our own names in Spain. I think that's so wonderful.
Yes.
Though it sometimes has confusions. You might have a C for casada on your DNI without the husband's name. But in France, where I have a son and spend probably a fourth of my life, they insist on calling me Madame Torres Arruga Luis on documents. And I have to go in every time and say Jane Larson. No, I reduced everything to Jane Larson. Oh, we could talk about the States, too, and what's happening there. I mean, as far as incipient Patriot Acts. No, every time I went to the States, I was specially frisked. I don't know if this happened to you. Always taken. There was a red spot on my ticket that made this necessary. And part of it, I thought, is because I had Jane Torres on my American passport. And I finally got that changed in the consul without having to go spend 6 months in Minnesota and go to a judge, which they had told me. But anyway, just this thing of the name. In Spain, I'm Jane Larson with my mother's maiden name afterwards.
Yeah.
That's a plus for women, yeah.
Good. That's good. How you doing over there? That's good.